Start. Hello, I am Corey from the Suffolk Public Library. Also with me is Matt Thompson from the Suffolk Public Library, and we are here for our Black and Super uh, panel about Afrofuturism. And joining us is Dr. Grace Gibson. Uh, Hi, Dr. Gibson. How are you doing today?
I am feeling good, feeling good. It's a Monday. It's a great day starting out the week,
Yeah,
and
that's true.
to nerd
Yeah,
out and talk some stuff today.
thanks
Yeah,
for
I'm
taking
excited.
some
I'm
time
excited.
out of your busy schedule to come and talk to us tonight. We really appreciate it. And I've been looking forward to this for weeks. This is going to be really cool.
Awesome, awesome. Yay.
To start off with, Doctor, if you could maybe just give us like a brief, I guess as brief as you can, a definition of what Afrofuturism is for people that haven't heard of it.
Got it. Yes. Okay. So I always like to preface by saying that Afrofuturism is ever evolving. And so regardless of, what I say today, like tomorrow, it will always be ever evolving. So, but today on February 14th, how I see Afrofuturism is exploring the Black and African diasporic experience through technology, through film, through music. And via that, through Afrofuturism, there is a reclamation, a rewriting, and a retelling of stories of those of the African diaspora. So I kind of sum that all together there. And, for me, the basic, if I had to like even simplify it more, is a rewriting, a retelling, a reclaiming of
Mhm.
the Black and African diasporic experience.
Does Afrofuturism have a starting point in its evolution? Where does it begin?
So some will say that it began with W.E.B. Du Bois and his short story The Comet. But if you want to get like the formal actual naming of Afrofuturism, Mark Derry is one of the key people who coined the term. And so that happens in 1993. But many folks who follow and use Afrofuturism will even, like I said, date it back to 1903. Many have even called W.B. Du Bois kind of a grandfather of Afrofuturism. And it's interesting because a lot of people didn't even know that he wrote short stories, even sci-fi related. So yeah,
So we should say that Du Bois is a very prominent African American sociologist and historian.
absolutely.
And in reading up about Afrofuturism, I did not know that W.E.B. Du Bois published short stories in his lifetime. I was so fascinated by that.
So yeah, that's I always like to throw that in there because people will immediately date like 1993 as like the official coining, even though before that you're seeing Parliament Funkadelic doing Afrofuturism. You're seeing many people have put Basquiat and his art in there. Octavia Butler's work. But so it really kind of depends on how ask the question, when was it formally coined or when would we say, when did it get started? So yeah.
As you mentioned, it is like a variety of stuff across different media.
Mhm.
You did mention the Parliament. Like, is like what would you say like on a musical uh scale? Like, what would be considered like Afrofuturism? Like,
Yeah, so like I said, definitely Parliament Funkadelic. I would even say Bootsy Collins. I'd even put him in that category. Um the labels, and particularly when their outfits were definitely much seen as Afrofuturistic. Early Earth, Wind and Fire definitely would be seen as Afrofuturistic. Um who else? I mean, if you look at present day, I want to say, I think I got FKA Twigs, I believe I think that's how it is, the artist. Many have seen her kind of as Afrofuturistic. Um, you would also say Flying Lotus, who's very popular. Definitely, I would say, falls into that category. Um, he just made a feature in Boba Fett. Oh God, why is his name escaping me? But yeah, there's several I would say would even that kind of fit into that category as far as musician wise. Anybody who's kind of experimenting, some might even say Prince could even, be considered in Afrofuturism. Definitely Janelle Monáe, I would even, place in there as well. So yeah.
Now, you would say with this intersection, what makes this important for people? Like I know, like I feel like in the general consciousness, like um I may be oversimplifying it, but like I feel like Afrofuturism really came to like the forefront with like Black Panther, but like as you've mentioned, like it's been here for like decades. Then like why do you think it's like an important thing that like keeps has been persisting for so long?
It's important because it allows for another avenue to talk about the Black experience, and it allows for a kind of coming back, if or and a giving back. So if we think about like Sankofa and the ways like looking back to to make sure to move forward, and Afrofuturism allows for the opportunity to correct or at least attempt to correct the past so that it impacts the present, so that we later can see what will happen in the future. And so it's it's multi-level, it's multi-dimensional. It has different gateways because it deals with music, it deals with technology, it deals with art. No one person is gonna fit into Afrofuturism, which is great because like I said, it allows many different types of audiences. And I think people, once they kind of dive into it, realize how much like, oh wow, I could be an Afrofuturist, or maybe I might have an interest in it. And so that's why I've always loved about Afrofuturism, and the fact that it's just ongoing, and it's every, like I said, it's ever evolving. So yeah.
So when I think about reclamation and the activity of taking back, that really, I think, connotates a lot of agency. One is not a passive consumer of media in taking back. You're actively engaged in the reclamation process.
And to add on to that, so I think about Octavia Butler's Kindred, the novel of Kindred, and how many have seen that as as this neo-slave narrative. Most English departments even consider it a classic, classic novel, classic literature text, and it allows for us to talk about slavery in a different point of view. And so, because there's been different interpretations, or maybe lack thereof of interpretations of certain movements and certain historical moments. You have something like Kindred that gives us an opportunity to reclaim what did happen and transform it into another format.
There's this really common trope in science fiction, and so much of science fiction is just permeated with colonialism. And we
Mhm.
think about the lost civilization and like stumbling onto people who come out of the past.
Right.
Um, how does the activity of reclamation give us a new way to breathe different kind of life into those old colonial tropes?
So it's one, it allows us to say that we're not only bounded by this, and that there is some sort of liberation that has come from this colonialism, even if it is, even if it did have a place or it was existed. There is some freeing, some liberation from that colonialism, and that, like I said, we're not bound by that, and we don't have to feel like that is the only story that has to be told. So the reclamation gives, like I said, another perspective. It gives another story. It even creatively makes us think differently about colonialism, the way maybe we have been taught or it's been historically portrayed.
What really got you into the Afrofuturism? Like, was there like a particular uh like book or music or something that like
Was there
you
like
could
an
like really
aha moment, or was it
yeah.
just like sort of realize you were
Good
seeping in at
question.
the same
No
time?
one has asked that question. In all of the times that I talk about Afrofuturism, nobody has asked that. So this is really good that you did. Um, so I've always liked comic books, and that's been something that I have loved since I was a kid. And it probably was once I got into my master's program at Georgia State when I was writing my thesis. And I was like kind of taking some classes, hearing about some things, about this whole futurism and Black futures. And I was like, what does this mean? And, it sounds pretty cool. And I've always been a sci-fi fan, fantasy fan. So I guess one could say I was already in it without realizing that it existed. But it was definitely probably during my master's program, and like I said, at Georgia State, writing my thesis, and I was doing some research, and I saw how they had this article from Mark Derry where he was talking about coining the term, and I was like, this is what I'm doing. Like my work coincides with this, and I've been reading these texts all along. So you mean tell me there was like an actual term that put this all together? So doing research, I came upon it and realized that my work, my research, who I am as even a person outside of as a scholar, really fit into what Afrofuturism is all about.
I know it was a real big moment for us in libraries when um, Black Panther the movie came out. Corey, was that the direct inspiration for you to organize Black and Super?
It actually was me and one of my another one of our coworkers, Tiffany. We had noticed how like a lot of the teens had like gotten super into um, Black Panther, and we wanted to do something special for Black History Month, but like uh, sort of like a different take on like uh, the historical aspect of it, like just that like it wasn't just even though like they are very important, that there's like stuff that like kids were interested in, like the history of comics, like they didn't know that like there was like a lot of comic creators from like the early 1900s and stuff. And like we did like some research, found out some documentaries and stuff, and so we like pulled a bunch of stuff together, and that was like sort of what led us into creating this program that we're doing. So, um, but
And
yeah,
I think Black Panther became a lot of people's kind of entry point into Afrofuturism. And then once like that was broken down and other things came into the picture, then people realized, oh, wait a minute. So we've been talking about Afrofuturism even before Black. One that I really, when I tell people about this artist, Missy Elliott, who I failed to mention early on, if you look at some of her like early music videos, I'm like, that was the modern day 20th, 21st century version of Afrofuturism. And when people see, they're like, what that? Yeah, I'm like, yeah, she was like totally, all like in space musically and in space, on Earth and all of that. So, um, that's why I'm like so glad that people are connecting with it and seeing different ways in which they could connect with it. And it was perfect also that Black Panther came out. Shout out to them wearing the Loyal to the Throne here.
yeah.
Um, yeah, it just offered another lots of other conversations, to happen, and it brings in the continent of Africa, which some people don't automatically assume is connected to Afrofuturism, but it is. And then there's even African futurism, which Nedia Corfor coined. So, you have that, which I like to, put all of the diaspora together, but some people are, want specific, um, naming, which I totally care and respect. So, yeah.
Just real quick, for people that don't know, can you sort of explain what the diaspora is? Like
Yes.
maybe like give a little brief intro to that.
So when I mentioned the diaspora, so Africa being the central key point, and those who have left and went to various places, but the root is Africa. And sometimes I often refer to Africa as the continent. And so many people were taken not just to the U.S., but were taken to the Caribbean, we're taken to South America, we're taken to Europe, and so there's a lot of African connections and roots throughout the world. And so the diaspora is kind of like that bridging or that home connection, and how I can connect with someone even though I'm here in America, but I can connect with someone who's in the Caribbean because we kind of have a joint connection to the continent. So yeah, the diaspora is diverse and it is wide, and you see that a lot within Afrofuturism as well, seeing Caribbean centered stories or stories that are centered, particularly London and England has a lot of roots as it relates to speaking about the diaspora, and Afrofuturism even so too. So
So one of the great moments in history, uh, great period in history with regard to the diaspora is the Middle Passage, and
yes,
uh, the Middle Passage and that moment of leaving Africa, and Africa recedes into the distance. And gosh, I think it was Nikki Giovanni I saw speak, and she was talking about it, one of her poems, and you could like the heat is rising off of the continent, it's bending the light as the slave ship sails away. Um, this leads me into the idea of alienation
yes,
in the diaspora, which in Afrofuturism takes us to the extraterrestrial.
hmm
And we start seeing things like the Mothership Connection, Outcast AT Aliens.
yes.
Um, I'm thinking about like maybe even Deltron 3030. Can you talk to us a little bit about aliens and what might face Black people in outer space?
Yeah, so there's already, this notion that Black people don't exist in outer space. So you have that notion also. And if they do exist, there's like maybe only a few of us that exist. So, that speaks to the alienation of like, there's only a few of us. So, we're this high commodity, even though there's just this one person. Also when thinking about alienation is how Black people in general often feel alienated in just spaces that should be of comfort to them or should feel like
Okay.
home, but do not. Um, some people will even say they feel, Black folks will even say, I feel like an alien here in the US, but this is where I live, this is where I breathe, but yet I still feel like an outsider. You when you move to a town where you're, maybe the only person of color there, that there's an alienation that exists there as well. And so Afrofuturism uses that theme to speak about that, to talk about it, to critique it, to offer some commentary on it. You brought up ATLiens, and with Outkast bringing that up and how they would tell stories about what happened, particularly like in Atlanta and in Georgia, of suffering and even joy, but then at the same time still offering a this idea of like, but we still have to fight, we still have to struggle, that doesn't go away. And so alienation is not it, the topic and the theme is not to make one feel sad per se, but it's to offer a sense of a reality and offer this way of discussing the ways in which people feel even today, and maybe in the past, but people still feel that way even now.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't shout out Diggable Planets.
Oh
Oh,
yes.
the planets. Oh my gosh. I love that record.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And there's so many. I mean, I'm sure probably as we continue, like more people will come to mind, like, yep, that person counts, that person counts. So yeah.
I feel like this is also like something that's like connected like the black nerd community, that's like
Mhm.
sort of like uh I feel like it's becoming like more prominent in general, like as uh like again, as people like see like this representation in like media, and like as stuff is like sort of being with the internet like not discovered but like sort of just shared, and like people
Right.
are like able to like a bigger connection. Do you have any thoughts like on that? Like,
Yeah. So I mean, the big thing and the buzzwords, of like representation matters. And I can remember when I was growing up, I didn't see characters that looked like me. And so now, at 40, I'm like, there's a plethora of people that look like me. And, my nieces and nephews can say that there's someone that they can look up to, and that, they can be a part of that community. And even specifically looking at like the Black nerd community, there was a time that I would never have wanted to put nerd as a label with myself. Never. That, it was just not cool. Now it's real cool to say that you're a blurred or you're a Black nerd, and being able to share that common interest with other people who are just as much confident, in saying that they're a nerd as well too. It just goes into this idea of being able to feel like you belong. And the Black nerd community has offered a space to be able to do that, and it has widespread. You can travel around and you're going to find that community, in many different places. And so, whereas, like I said, there was a time where maybe people felt shamed, or maybe people didn't want to put that out there, or feel like they were exposed in some way. But now it's like I said, it's the cool thing. The Black nerds are the cool kids now. So
Well, maybe in the recent past, people didn't have such easy access to
yep.
all of this information like they do today, and you don't have to like be part of a scene to know
Yes.
about Afrofuturism. You just need like, a cell phone and some minutes on it.
Yeah. I mean, you can go to YouTube, you can go,
Mhm.
you can turn on your TV, you can listen to a song, and songs that probably people have been listening to already. And, it just now there's a definition for them. There's a picture, there's an image that has been provided to kind of make the connection. So,
So you said you were into comics, but you didn't
yes.
say whether it was Marvel or DC or what. Um, you want
Yeah.
to you want to give a shout out to some of your favorite Black or African American superheroes. I know you mentioned I didn't see anybody who looked like me, and I'm thinking about it. Yeah, there was a lot of sidekicks,
Yes.
like the Falcon,
Right.
and uh, Black Panther was different in that regards.
Mhm.
But was there a character that stood out to you in your youth? And you're like,
So
I
my
gotta have
entry
this.
into comics was Storm. So when I saw Storm, I wanted to be Storm. Still want to be Storm.
Yeah.
um, like, because she could control the elements, she could control the weather, and I'm like, I want to do that. Can I do it? But that was one of the only people, like main key people. Like you said, there was definitely sidekicks, and there was definitely other characters, but you didn't see them as often. And when you did, they were seen in a way that I was like, I don't want to act that way. I don't want to be seen in that light. And so, those characters are problematic. um but Storm would be the entry point in. I lean towards Marvel for the most part. However, there are some indie labels that I'm like really into. Image Comics, especially the comic book series Bitterroot, which is kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
called like this mix of the Walking Dead and meets the Harlem Renaissance. That's one of like my faves right now. There's a series from Boom Studio Comics called Eve from Victor Laval,
I haven't
which is
read that
another good one that it's about this, I want to say she's like 6, 7 year old Black girl who goes into space and is trying to make this connection with her father who has passed away. Um, Another series that I'm and it's still love and very much interested in, is the Life and Times of Martha Washington, which came out of Dark Horse Comics. And Dave Gibbons, and who was the writer of that one, one of the guys, he also wrote for Watchmen, as well. And so Martha Washington came out of the Cabrini Green projects of Chicago, became a military war hero. She was a computer tech genius, Black woman. And it was like there were more characters that I would see, in the 90s that I could relate to, and that I could really see myself in. Uh, some new characters that are out, not so much new, but came out in 2015, Lunella Lafayette, or Moon Girl. There's actually getting ready to be a series coming out on
Oh,
Disney.
really?
on Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, executive produced by Lawrence Fishburne.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
so that's been one. I've recently gone back in to investigate the Dora Milaje because they came out in 1998, but because they were basically the bodyguards to Black Panther got to shine. But then once the movie came out, then all of a sudden people were like, wait a minute, who are the Dora? And so I'm actually working on a chapter of a book project that I'm working on that is specifically focusing on the Dora Milaje. Because how many all female bodyguard units, do we know that exist? So,
I love that scene in Black Panther where it's the very beginning of the movie, and there's those two dudes and they're inside the house. And there's a loud knock at the door. There's some Grace Jones looking sisters out there.
yes. Another amazing moment was in the Falcon and Winter Soldier series on Disney Plus when Io is fighting against when the guy who's trying to be Captain America, tries to fight her, and he like takes her out. She takes him out like without question, and it was kind of like, dude, like, did you forget who they are? Like, did you not remember that? Like, don't kid yourself here. So, um, yeah, it was, just though they have been a group of women who I'm like, yes, we need to see more of you all. Like, please tell me you're coming back in Black Panther too. Like, you got to be there. So, yeah, those are just a few. Oh, Naomi, which
Yeah.
I'm watching the series on the CW and reading the comic, which out of DC Comics, written by David Walker, and Jamal Campbell is the illustrator. So there's that, and then there's Ironheart, who's also a Marvel character who takes the mantle from Iron Man, and she's a teen genius who goes to MIT. So you got a lot of the STEM field is incorporating itself in comics. Black Girl Math is incorporating itself in there. So yeah, the comics get a lot of my money. They get a lot of my so, but I've learned that I can write them off on my taxes because it's research. So
Oh, no way.
There you go. That's
Business
the trick.
expense.
yep. So yeah, there's so many more. I mean, those are right now. But trust me, if you ask me next week, I have some more. I could have a whole bunch more for you.
So like you had mentioned Bitterroot, and I was kind of curious about because that one is like set in the past.
Yes.
Is there with Afrofuturism, is there like sort of a I don't really know the right word, like maybe a
Are we about
delineation
to
for like
invent
stuff
Afro
that's like
steampunk?
alternate history, or
Yeah.
stuff that has like a fantasy bend? Does that
Yeah.
still sort of fall under the umbrella, or like um
Definitely. It definitely does because so we're, going back in time, 1920s, Harlem Renaissance, but there's ghosts and there's zombies and there's monsters. And so you're bringing in kind of like past meets another past, an alternative past for sure. Um, and just the fact that you're bringing in a historical time period that many people are familiar with, that many people also would not expect to see connected with that, because there were I mean, you think Zora Neale Hurston, you think Langston Hughes, with Harlem Renaissance, but you're also bringing in the fantasy, you're bringing in the sci-fi, you're bringing in a family who can, who are in a way kind of warriors, so to speak. They fight off these evil spirits. So it's definitely very much Afrofuturistic, in this play on the past, but in a way there's kind of like a future that's definitely connected with it, because the family is trying to pass down a legacy of who they are and want to make sure that that legacy continues going forward. So mhm.
you also mentioned sorry, what were you gonna say?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, so I was gonna bring up like you mentioned it like with stuff like Moon Girl and Naomi, that there's like sort of a running theme of like black girls in STEM, and with Ironheart as well. Is there any other like themes or like recurring things that you see in like a lot of the Afrofuturism media that's like
Yeah.
right now?
So, the STEM seems to be the running main theme. I'm, noticing a lot. I'm also seeing this idea of what it means to be gifted and kind of like complicating that term. Because like I remember when I think gifted, I'm like, I remember the gifted program in high school and how like the special kids who were seen as like really super smart were in that program. But oftentimes you did not see um, black girls and black boys in the gifted program. And so being, seeing these young preteen and teenagers in fields, so if you're even thinking of STEM, but even just generally thinking and seen as smart and seen as intelligent, that is a theme that, that I would say. So, this idea of being gifted, who gets to be gifted, this idea of um, sometimes this idea of what it means to grow up really fast, because in some of these stories, these are kids who are having to grow up before they should. And so, even having the conversation of what does it mean to be a kid, and when that childhood is taken away from you. So this idea of black girlhood, black boyhood, and how kids should cherish that. They shouldn't have to be adults before they, before they should. So STEM, what it means to be gifted, what it means to relish in one's childhood. Um, yeah, those would be some of the other things that like I'm definitely seeing a lot more of.
Talking about that theme of growing up really fast, and connecting back to your Storm fandom, X-Men and New Mutants was also really special to me.
Yes,
And part of what makes the mutants so compelling to a teenager, right, the idea that your body is changing
hmm,
and that your body is taking on new significance in a way that if you didn't anticipate as a young person, but now your body, other people are reacting to your body, maybe in horror or in desire, and you're having to confront all of the implications of that. It's just a pervasive theme throughout the X-Men.
definitely, definitely. And you brought up horror, which is another, kind of thread in Afrofuturism that we're seeing a lot more conversation, especially with Jordan Peele, and his I'm gonna say legacy of horror films because he's on the roll. I mean,
Yeah.
if you all haven't seen that new trailer of Nope,
Yeah, I saw the trailer on the Super Bowl last night, and it looks pretty hot.
so you got that, and then Nia DaCosta's, Candyman that came out last year,
Yeah.
and just even the original Candyman, and this idea of if you think about the horror genre, that was also something that you know when you thought about Black people, it was like when they died,
Victim.
and or what type of thing were they? They were like not even human. And so I feel like with Jordan Peele, especially, and Nia DaCosta, they are rewriting the horror script. Tananarive Due, I would also add into that. L.A. Banks. So these are writers and directors and creators who are, telling us about the horror field in a way that's very much more inclusive. Tananarive Due has a quote where she says, people have always been interested in Black people in horror, but don't necessarily realize that the horror exists for us every day. It's, we're dealing with the trauma and horror all day, every day.
Well, is this another instance of reclamation from the, I guess, from the point of view of the creator, right? The creator has taken back this genre. Um, I used to be the victim, but now I'm in charge, and now you're going to see what's really scary.
Exactly. So there's reclamation, there's retelling, rewriting, because if we think about the new Candyman, there's kind of even a rewriting of that script just a little bit, or a retelling from another perspective. Still the same struggle, but just offering another point of view to that. So yeah.
Corey, didn't Nick say something about there's going to be a new Spawn?
Yeah.
A lot, but I haven't seen anything yet come to fruition.
No, I haven't seen anything concrete other than like I think they like casted somebody, but like I haven't seen anything other than that. But
There is a new
It's
Blade
interesting.
that is coming.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
I am
Yeah,
curious to
Blade
see
is
the
coming.
new Blade.
I'm excited for that as well.
So
I'm here to represent Blade 2, y'all. I think that Blade 2 is the superior Blade.
and I'm a fan of Mahershala Ali, so I'm like, yep, I'm good with him taking over the Blade mantle from Wesley. So yeah, that one works. That one, because sometimes when some people, the casting changes, you're like, I don't know if that quite worked or not, but yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I'm trying to think other things. So outside of there's horror, there's the music, there's comics, art is something that you can incorporate another audience into Afrofuturism when you incorporate the actual like art and sculptures. So that's something that definitely is not talked about as much, and so I think that can bring in other eyes to what Afrofuturism is really all about. So
I
So
feel like
I was
sorry.
trying to read up about it, and Jean-Michel Basquiat comes up a lot
yes,
in the context of the grotesque.
yes,
Uh,
absolutely.
what's the connection between Afrofuturism and the grotesque? Like,
So there's also offering this commentary on what Black bodies have been seen as grotesque. And so this is definitely particularly seen with those who are portrayed as enslaved, those who have been enslaved. So there's the body is seen as a grotesque object. Also, Black women in particular, certain features of them are seen as enticing, but also grotesque. One person that comes to mind is um, Satarji Bartman and or Sarah also known as Venus Hottentot, was also known as Venus Hottentot. And so
oh,
she
okay.
was seen as, grotesque because of her posterior, her large posterior, but also was seen as like this exhibition, like, ooh, this is fascinating, but it's also, ooh, kind of cringing. So the grotesque, there is a kind of like an example that people will tend to look at and will speak to as it relates to that, or anything that seems abnormal and abnormal to who, but the abnormal becomes a part of that conversation of the grotesque.
I like to think of it as ambivalence. There's this thing that I want it, oh, but I'm afraid of it. Oh,
Yes,
but oh,
definitely.
that's the thing that I gotta have that. Oh, but if I touch it, that's wrong.
Yep.
Those conflicting, I guess, like psychological energy that's happening there.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting because with the grotesque, it's like you want certain things from the Black body, but then you also want to take apart the Black body as well too. So it's like, what do you want? What do you want to do here? What you trying to do? So yeah.
So we really see this in superheroes with Cyborg, Cyborg from Teen Titans.
Yep. Yep.
So his story is his parents are like super scientists,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they open up the dimension portal, and this monster comes through, and it blows up the lab and kills his mom.
Yep.
And his dad goes to save his life and turns him into Cyborg, and he has like all of these new body parts he's been like taken apart and put back
Mm-hmm.
together.
And that
Um,
whole being put back together, even
yeah.
put that down and like, what does it mean to be human? Because spoiler alert if you haven't seen the 4 hour Snyder cut. Like he questions like, what do I am I human? Why do I seem different to you? So yeah. Yeah. So yeah, Cyborg becomes a very good example of man versus machine, type of idea there. I would even include Misty Knight from the Marvel comics and her bionic arm that she has. And so that also brings in the conversation about disability and like, what does it mean to be an able body? And who gets to, what is seen as acceptable, because even that could be part of the grotesque. Some people might include that conversation in the grotesque, because there's the crypt theory that you get out of that also. But one has to be careful when talking about basically over sensationalizing those who may seem different or who appear different. So
I feel like when you bring that up, it like also like sort of also begins to talk about like appropriation, like
yes.
cultural appropriation. Have you noticed like, or have you seen like any like of that like with Afrofuturism? Has there been any like sort of appropriation or like sort of either exploitation of it like that you've noticed or like uh,
Yeah. So
Hmm.
recently I feel like there's been like this very thin line of appreciating Afrofuturism and also trying to capitalize on it, because I feel like some people are like, oh, just because it deals with technology and Black people, it's Afrofuturism. Well, no, not so much. That doesn't automatically fit there, and we can't just automatically assume and make that connection. I would also say that, um, when people see artists that are different than whatever the traditional norm is, then that becomes like, oh, they're Afrofuturistic, or oh, they're outer space, outside of space. And that may not even be the artist's intention. They may just be seen as different. Thundercat, the name came back to me. The guy.
yeah, yeah.
Do you
Uh,
know Eve Toomer?
say it again.
Eve Toomer.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So I definitely do see, there's some appropriation. I definitely see some trying to commodify, like, how can we make money off of this? How can we, capitalizing of it? So, and that's when I start saying how much are these people invested in Afrofuturism and what it can do, or is it just for, I can get some money real quick from it. So.
This might not relate exactly with Afrofuturism, but also with like some of the media that we've mentioned, like with X-Men and stuff like that. There is like, and even with like some of the ways that like Cyborg is like portrayed, there's like the coding of
Mhm.
like uh a lot. I remember like in the cartoon with Cyborg, they were like talking about like how he was different from the rest of them, and it wasn't because of his race, it was because of his cyborgness. And like with X-Men, like there is like that they're a minority group, so
Mhm.
there's often been like that talk about like like similar like similarness to real life events and stuff. With with black coding, do you feel, is there like a place for that in like Afrofuturism, or do you feel that like that's like pushing Afrofuturism aside, like having like even like another thing like Steven Universe is like a show with like aliens in it, and like a couple of them are like specifically coded to like be like black women, but they're not actually black women. Like where do you feel like that falls?
I definitely do see there's a place for it, and maybe more interrogation needs to be done, more conversations, more digging, more kind of taking apart, building back together. I think needs to happen. I mean, coding in itself is something that I've seen in Afrofuturism anyway. So I definitely would say that it has a place. And now, how does it fit in? And maybe there's not like a unique, perfect fitting either, but definitely it has a place in there. And I feel like more conversation should be had around it. And you actually, as you were speaking, you made me think about Cyborg in a way. Another conversation that has been had about him was the way he was emasculated, in like during the Justice League, and how he was seen and seen as different. And so because he was this machine, he's less of a man, than
Yeah,
and more of the robot. And so those are conversations also that you're seeing, you know, um, in Afrofuturism as well. And just kind of like, what is feminine, what is masculine, and who gets to portray that, and at what cost do they, also get to portray that too.
He's just a really relatable character.
Mhm.
The whole concept of where does my body end and technology begin? You know,
Yep.
what's the boundary of myself and where does I bleed into society?
Mhm.
Um, those are things that everybody has to deal with.
Yep. Yep. So, another theme that kind of gets put into Afrofuturism and more connected to horror than anything, though, it's like the vampire story. And so,
Yeah.
Octavia Butler's series Fledgling, looks at this at vampirism. It also looks at youth and like this fountain of youth, and and it's seen through the eyes of what some may think as a black woman, but Butler never really says whether, doesn't really place a gender. And so, which I really appreciated that she was very open. She was very fluid when it came to gender in her stories. And so it allowed for anybody to kind of feel like they fit in or they could place themselves into that particular character. So, mhm. What do you
Doesn't
see you guys' favorite, like sci-fi and, do you all have any like favorite comics that you all read or pick up every now and then?
Most recently, my wife and I just finished the Amazon Prime series Wheel of Time, and
Yes.
it was done in that kind of like Shonda Rhimes blind casting style, where uh, the the actors that were portraying the characters were themselves very diverse, and uh, it just I really appreciated it. Um,
Mhm.
you know, I don't watch a lot of Shonda Rhimes kind of like drama and stuff. That doesn't really appeal to me. Um, I'd rather watch sports. But so I guess that kind of hadn't sunk into me, but to see it in like a straight fantasy
Yeah.
context, I loved the heck out of it.
Hmm.
I thought it was really cool. I will look forward to season two.
I saw it as like another gateway for if you didn't like Game of Thrones, like Wheel of Time was kind of like, here we go. Okay, let's try this one. If you didn't get Game of Thrones, if that was your cup of tea, we can do we can do Wheel of Time. And there's a new series that's I think like a side story of the Lord of the Rings saga that's supposed to be coming out on Amazon Prime in September. So I'll be curious to see how if that will include characters of color, and if so, in what way.
I haven't heard too much about it, but I believe they said that they have cast some characters of color in it.
Okay.
So and there was like because there's always some backlash,
Yeah.
but but I'd be interested to see how like that plays out. And same with Wheel of Time. I read the books, but I haven't seen the series yet. But
You read the books. Wow, how many?
yeah,
There's like a jillion of them. Man,
How many
which one
books
did you
it's a
you
lot
read?
of books. It's I did it on audio, and it
Okay.
was when I was traveling, it was a good use of travel time.
Okay, that's good to know. Might have to do that. Yeah. I missed all of that.
But for me, like something that I was doing, like me and a roommate and I, we are going through some old milestone comics
Ooh,
for Black History Month. So that has been an interesting dive. I hadn't really read a lot of them beforehand, but it's interesting that like they're actually more topical than I was expecting, like especially compared to like a lot of other comics that were coming out in the '90s that like were felt more like they were with it at the time, like and stuff. But now they're just like very dated.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Rocket, who with Rocket and Icon that came out of Milestone, that was one of my favorites. And her storyline was actually quite innovative and ahead of its time. In her series, she dealt with teen pregnancy and was the first comic book series, period, that dealt with that. And this was in like early '90s that they're having this conversation in comics. And so
Yeah,
Did
she
the
was
hero got pregnant?
So yeah, she was pregnant and had a baby and the whole nine.
I don't think I've ever read a story like that before.
It's rare. Like I said, she was the first. Her storyline was the first to ever do that within comics. I would say mainstream comics, because it probably happened in the indie realm, but
Yeah.
definitely within mainstream. Hers was the first, and she was a huge Toni Morrison fan. And she also kind of had an ideology much like Du Bois. So you could see how Milestone was very much incorporating a lot of history and historical figures in their
Yeah.
characters. So yeah.
And they did, and we noticed because we did a couple of issues of each of like the first four series, and we noticed that like there was like sort of a recurring thing that like there was um, a lot of female characters that were like aware, like with Rocket, and again with I don't remember her name, but in Hardware, he has
Yes.
a female acquaintance that they're more sort of moral. They're like the male characters have sort of just surrendered to what society is at the time, and it's I find that kind of interesting that like they were kind of like, yeah, maybe you kind of lost your way along the way and you need to like sort of remember your morals. So that was kind of interesting.
Hmm. I hope they bring back Static Shock, because he was like really cool and he had a very, universal appeal.
Yeah,
Also, so yeah.
yeah, that would be exciting if they do. Um, is
Yes.
there um, any like particular media that you would recommend to any of our listeners out there? Uh,
Yeah. So I got a couple books here. Let me pull the share.
Share, share.
So definitely recommend the Children of Blood and Bone series and Children of Virtue and Vengeance.
Okay.
Definitely recommend these. They're thick, but I got through this. I feel like I got it through in a week. That's how great the storyline was. So definitely recommend this series. I would also recommend anything from, oh no,
oh no.
any,
Were those
anything.
Funko Pops that just fell over?
Yeah, my Funko Pops here. Anything from N.K. Jemisin, but especially How Long Till Black Future Month. Definitely highly recommend for sure there. If you're able to purchase Funko Pop dolls, definitely get those. They're like, um, if you want to be introduced into Afrofuturism, this is a very easy read. Afrofuturism from Yatasha Womack. And then a selfless plug, because I have a chapter in this book, Afrofuturism 2.0. This offers another outlet to talk about Afrofuturism from various standpoints. And so, like I said, both of these are good entry points. If you're like just starting out learning about Afrofuturism, definitely would recommend both of these books. So, and a book that's similar to Kindred, I think, is from Nicole Glover, called The Conductors, and then also The Perishing. So these are a few that I would definitely recommend. I definitely send a list to you guys so you can have that. I'm trying to think if I have some comics back here. Let's see. Here's the Naomi comic from DC.
Cool.
The Eve comic that I was talking about earlier. If you want to go back to the Milestone, definitely Icon and Rocket. These are classics right here. What else? Yeah, there's so many others that are slipping my mind, but yeah, I would start. You can definitely start with these. It won't steer you wrong. It'll probably take you in some directions of other books. Actually, I do have another here. This was called Body Minds Reimagined. So this looks at the speculative and also incorporates it with disability. So the speculative, disability, and even so race, gender, and Black women speculative fiction. So definitely recommend this one. This is from Sammy Shalk, and so this is definitely a huge recommend as well too. So yeah, those would be.
A couple questions about VCU. You ever get down to the comic book special collection in the library? And have you had the chance to teach an Afrofuturism class to students? or you just still trying to like you sneaking it in with the classes that you got to teach?
Yeah, so it gets talked about so I teach an introduction to Africana studies, and we do a whole 2 weeks on Afrofuturism because I talk about the future of Africana studies, and we have a whole dialogue conversation on Afrofuturism. I taught a course on Black popular culture, and Afrofuturism always makes its way in there. I haven't yet, so which means it can and still will happen. I've done a course specifically on Afrofuturism. That's in the making. That's in the making for sure. Um, but I have been to the special collections and actually plan to spend a lot more time there over the summer as I'm working on my book. So yeah, that will be probably almost a second home for me come this summer. So yeah, it's been exciting. And I was like totally amazed because they had a original of the first all Negro comics.
Yeah, I saw that on the website. I was like, oh, that's awesome. So
Actually got to touch it, and it was like, oh my god, this thing is
that's so
so
cool. It's so
yeah,
cool.
so it's since moving to Richmond, that's been like really exciting. And then I'm like, I work at VCU and they have a special collection. Like, well, but you know how much greater can it get? So yeah.
Can you share? I know you do. Aside from being at VCU, you also do a podcast, correct? Like,
Yes.
what other things do you
Yeah,
do?
it looks like you're doing a little bit of blogging too.
Yeah, so definitely check me out on my website, blackfuturefeminist.com. Myself and one of my colleagues who's a professor at Furman University, Dr. Kaniqua Robinson, we do a podcast called Conversations with Beloved and Kindred. We are both huge fans of Toni Morrison and Octavia Butler, so hence Beloved and Kindred combining. And so we just started our second season. And so this second season, we're focusing all on Black cinematic horror. Last season, we looked at Lovecraft and we did various movies and other television series. So you can find all those on YouTube and also on my website as well. And our first episode from the second season, we talked about horror noir, the documentary, and Ganja and Hess. So that's how we jump started the new season. So that's really exciting because we watch the movies and then we come back and have like this dialogue about what we learned and what we got out of the series or out of the movie itself. So like I said, this season is all about horror. So it's going to be all Black horror films from we just started this month and we'll go all the way through May.
Nice.
Mhm.
Very cool.
I know we're wrapping up, but I do have to ask, since you did mention Beloved, what do you have any thoughts on like I know like recently a lot of like books are like coming up again as being like banned, like with Beloved and like with
Yes.
Mouse.
This is a major concern for us as librarians.
Does it seem like it's uh a lot of it seems like it's like material that was like either by creators of color or like is about minority topics, like what would your advice be with like dealing with that, or if like people like question like why it's banned, or like
Yeah. So let me just say it's a shame because like people are missing out on the jewels of each of all of those books that, of the list of books that are, being banned. I think people have to open their minds to these stories and, there's too much closed mindedness that's going on. Um, I feel like there has to be some kind of renegade moment, and I don't know how the libraries are going to deal with that. But whether it's like making the suggestions on the side, like, hey, you want to check, make sure you check out this, but yeah, like here, go here. But it's unfortunate that people don't see the value of these texts, and it's like all of a sudden that a text that has been around since 60s and 70s is like, oh, we don't want this anymore. Like, why now? What happened when it first came out?
yeah.
So and clearly somebody likes it and somebody enjoys it because the book has been reprint and reprint and reprint.
Right.
So yeah, and I'm glad you all mentioned that because it's like however way even like someone like me, an academic, can assist. I want to make sure, because these are books that need to be in the libraries, in the curriculum. They get squeezed into mine. Kindred often
Mhm.
finds its way on my required reading list. So
I
yeah.
feel like we have had like an uptick in circs of mouse at least. I have noticed that a little bit
Yeah.
just in the past couple of weeks. I've seen it like on the whole shelf a couple times, so I was like, that's good. So
Hmm.
these,
And as long as it's maybe some people say, any press is good press. So as long as you have this idea of like what shouldn't be there, people are going to be like, well, if it shouldn't be there, well, why? Well, let me go check it out and
yeah,
see why. So I think in a way, it's also piquing and intriguing other people to want to read it and want to get have these books maybe even in their collection. So yeah, basically they need to stay.
yeah.
That's why. Don't take them anywhere. They need to be right there. That's where their home's supposed to be.
Well, Dr. Gibson, we're totally blown away by conversation with you tonight. This was a lot of fun. I know Corey had a whole lot of stuff planned for Black and Super that we had to put on hold because of the pandemic and
Yeah,
the restrictions that were placed on us. But I heard he told me that you were willing to come down to Suffolk just
I am.
to meet us in person, and
Yes.
that's so wonderful. Um, hey, you want to take a break from your studies and come to the beach this summer? Make sure you stop by Suffolk Public Library and say hi,
Yeah,
Absolutely.
because we would
Yes.
love to receive you.
I look forward to that.
yeah,
Maybe a couple of cameo shots and all that good stuff. So yeah.
yeah. So we
And
definitely hope to have you like in
mhm.
person as soon as we can. So
Please keep me posted, because I'm definitely living in Virginia. I want to discover and explore. That's the futurist, the Afrofuturist in me is the discovering too. So yeah.
awesome,
Someday
awesome.
soon we all will be together.
Indeed.
Yeah,
Yes.
and
But thank you all too for inviting me into this conversation. And I'm always willing to talk about and geek out and nerd out on Afrofuturism, comics, all of that good stuff. So
Yeah,
this was
yeah,
fun.
your passion for the subject is totally infectious.
Yeah.
What a fun talk we had tonight. This is
yeah,
great.
Yes, this was no work at all.
Hey, it's my day off. Okay, I still came.
Well, I did appreciate you taking the time. This has been a lot of fun. And speaking of Black and Super, we do have a virtual trivia program for you at home. If you check in the comments below, along with that reader advisory list, there will be the trivia out there that you can try your hand at. And if
And the
you
Black and Super Spotify playlist.
yeah, the Spotify playlist as well. If you participate in that trivia, you'll be entered in that fun raffle to win a cool prize. We have some good. Uh,
Can
some,
I enter into that?
yeah, yeah. You're not a library staff member, so you were you're definitely available.
Awesome, awesome. Yes, yes. Thank you all again. This was so much fun. I do appreciate it.
Yeah. So well, thank you, and have a good evening. So,
You do the same.
okay, bye.